1:23 a.m., April 26, 1986. Leonid Toptunov stares at the control panel in front of him. His hands are shaking. The 26-year-old has been an operator at Chernobyl nuclear power plant for less than a year. Something is wrong. The readings on the panel make no sense. Numbers that should be falling are climbing. Numbers that should be stable are spiking. He reaches for the emergency shutdown button. He presses it. Nothing happens. In the next 40 seconds, reactor number 4 will explode with a force 10 times greater than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. And Leonid is standing 4 meters away. Go back 12 hours. It is 1 p.m. on April 25, 1986. Leonid Toptunov arrives at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant for what should be a routine night shift. He walks through the main entrance, a wide, sterile corridor of white tiles and fluorescent lighting. The plant hums with quiet industrial confidence. To his left is the administrative wing, offices where managers sit behind desks reviewing output reports that look perfect on paper. To his right, the changing rooms where workers swap their street clothes for white lab coats and dosimeter badges, small devices clipped to their chest that measure radiation exposure. Leonid clips his on without a second thought. He has no idea it will be the last time. The Chernobyl plant is made up of 4 operational reactors. Each reactor building is massive, over 70 meters tall, connected by a long central corridor workers call the Golden Corridor because of its yellow walls and the sense of pride that comes with working here. This is the crown jewel of Soviet nuclear engineering, or so they believe. Leonid makes his way to the control room of reactor number 4. The room is surprisingly ordinary for something that controls the power of a small sun. Rows of instrument panels stretch across the walls, hundreds of dials, switches, and gauges. Overhead, strip lights hum. The air is cool and dry. Seated at the main reactor console is Alexander Akimov, the shift foreman. He is calm, methodical, and experienced. He greets Leonid with a nod. Tonight, they have been assigned a safety test. The test has actually been delayed 4 times. It was supposed to happen during the day shift, but political pressure from Kyiv demanded the plant keep producing power through peak hours. So the test was pushed to the night shift, to the least experienced crew. Nobody questions this. The test is simple in theory. Engineers want to know if, during a power outage, the momentum of the turbine spinning down could generate enough electricity to keep the reactor's cooling pumps running for 60 to 75 seconds until the backup generators kick in. A gap of 75 seconds. That is all they need to close. What they do not know is that closing that gap will open something far worse. 11 p.m. To run it correctly, the reactor must be brought down to a low power level, between 700 and 1,000 megawatts. Leonid is at the controls. He begins reducing power carefully, methodically. Then, a miscommunication happens. A previous operator had left a setting in the wrong position. Leonid doesn't catch it immediately. The reactor power drops, not to 700 megawatts. It falls to 30. The control room goes quiet. At 30 megawatts, the reactor is in a critically unstable condition. A phenomenon called xenon poisoning is taking hold. A buildup of radioactive xenon gas that absorbs neutrons and suffocates the reactor's chain reaction like a hand closing around a throat. Akimov looks at the readings. His jaw tightens. They have 2 choices. Shut the reactor down completely and abandon the test, which means facing Soviet bureaucrats and explaining failure, or try to raise the power back up and continue. Anatoly Dyatlov is watching from the back of the room. He is the deputy chief engineer, the most senior man present. He is known across the plant for one thing above all others. He does not accept failure. "Raise the power," he orders. Leonid pulls control rods, the graphite-tipped mechanisms that regulate the reactor's chain reaction. He pulls more than procedure allows, then more again. Slowly, painfully, reactor power climbs back up. It stabilizes at 200 megawatts. Still dangerously low, still outside the parameters for the test. Every trained instinct Leonid has is telling him something is wrong. Dyatlov tells them to proceed. Nobody argues. This is the Soviet Union. You do not argue. The control room of Reactor 4 is now operating a machine on the edge of physics, in a zone where the reactor becomes what engineers call positively voided. In plain language, the more steam builds inside, the more powerful the reaction becomes. It is the opposite of every safe reactor ever built in the Western world. But the men in this room do not know this. That information is classified. The Soviet state has buried it in documents nobody in this building has ever been allowed to read. 1 a.m., April 26th. 8 coolant pumps are now running simultaneously, more than the reactor was designed to handle at this power level. The coolant water rushing through the reactor core is so cold and so fast that it is absorbing neutrons faster than the reactor can produce them. Power begins to drop again. Leonid watches the gauges fall. He pulls more control rods. His movements are precise but increasingly desperate, a man trying to hold water in his hands. Akimov stands beside him. He is uncomfortable. He has been uncomfortable for the last 2 hours. At 1:19 a.m., Akimov turns to Dyatlov. "I think we should stop the test." Dyatlov doesn't look up from his clipboard. Continue. 1:21 a.m. The turbine test begins. Steam valves are closed. The turbines begin their spin down. This is the moment they have been building toward for 12 hours. For 36 seconds, nothing happens. Then, the reactor speaks. Power begins climbing, not slowly, not gradually, instantly. The xenon that was poisoning the reactor is being burned away by the sudden surge. The graphite tips on the control rods, a design flaw so catastrophic it would later be called criminal, are briefly accelerating the reaction instead of stopping it as they're inserted. Leonid's eyes are fixed on the power gauge. It passes 530 megawatts, then 1,000. 1:23 a.m. Akimov shouts, "Scram! Emergency shutdown!" Leonid slams his hand down on the AZ5 button. Every control rod begins dropping into the reactor core. For 2 seconds, nothing. Then, the building moves.